All right, so I'm back again doing another track breakdown, this time breaking down All That I Want. First things first, as always, appreciate everyone streaming the track and adding it to their playlists. If you haven't already, there's a link down in the description below. This one got added to Spotify's New Music Friday Canada, which is a huge deal, so thanks again. Check it out below if you haven't, and let's jump into the track. So as always, I group all of my projects into groups depending on the instrument. So you have piano, audio effects, guitars, synths, bass, orchestral elements, then all your drums, so your kick, big drums, and then kind of hi-hats and snares, and then vocals here and here with all of my risers and effects. And then down here I have different iterations of the mix and master project. So this is a little bit of a modified project for the breakdown, but within the final stages of mixing, and when I start to master, what I'll do is often I'll create different mix downs, and then I'll compare the mix downs to previous iterations to make sure I'm constantly progressing and getting the track to sound where I want it to sound. So jumping into the pianos, one thing I did interesting on this track, so if you've seen any of my track breakdowns before, generally I'll use a combination of Native Instruments Giant with the Imagiro piano. To me, the Giant has a little bit more depth, a little bit more lows, and the Imagiro piano has a bit more of the natural key feel, which I really like. So do a little bit of a pan, very slight right left to get a depth and image, and then it gets a nice, to my ear, realistic sounding piano. Now, one thing I did differently this time is a lot of times in my productions I like to add pedal notes. Big fan of those, but sometimes the pedal notes can get a little repetitive, a little annoying, it can be a little loud. So on this track in particular, I actually just added another instance of each piano so I could control the volume of that pedal note throughout the track. So here I have it mixed lower than the actual chords themselves, and that changes throughout the track. Something that I probably should have done on previous tracks, which I won't name, but that was something I did on this, which I felt was really useful when it came down to mixing and getting everything to sit right. And then as usual, I also tossed in some little reverse pianos to kind of push the track forward during that pre-chorus. So that's just the piano chords bounced, reversed, and then with a little bit of reverb. And I think I'm just using some Valhalla shimmer. Nothing too complicated on the pianos, running those through just a little bit of compression and EQ, and then some sidechain for the kick and snare. Now, in this track in particular, there is one element that I almost kind of changed the entire track to fit around, and that's this one kind of distortion that comes in, this kind of distorted reverb that comes in on the drop, which is this sound here. So this is actually a piano sample from an organic ambient sample pack. I don't remember what I did because I froze it at one point. So all you have here is it just running through a little bit of delay. I imagine I would have tossed it through some reverb, a ton of distortion, and then some auto pan and LFO, I guess, to kind of get that pumping and the left-right in the ears. But I'm a really big fan of this kind of distorted reverb drone. And at one point I almost ended up making that the lead because I really love the way that plays with the piano. But yeah, that's probably one of my favorite elements in this track. In terms of the rest of the little audio effects, got a little bit of like a sparkle, kind of high-end chimes, a little bit of an arp and bell that come in on the second half to give some kind of width and a little bit of ear candy, and then just some sweeps throughout. One thing I did do is I'm a big fan of Paul stretch. So on the last drop here, I actually took the entire track, If You Want It, which is the previous release, and I put that through Paul stretch. So yeah, I stretched the entire track, then just ran that through some LFO tool and EQ to get this kind of pad sound. and then I took that and gave it a little distortion, some delay, and built into it to give a little kind of riser. So yeah, so both those elements are actually just running the entirety of If You Want It, which is again the previous release, through Paul Stretch to create this kind of like ambient pad, and then processing that to give a nice little kind of white noise element, and then riser to the end of the track. But yeah, other than that, pretty simple. I'll give a quick shout out to Adam, who again has sent over tons of nice little samples. He's got one on Gumroad you should go pick up. That's just a nice little drone here that again gives a nice little kind of tension against the piano on the drop. Big fan of those types of elements. All right, next up is the guitar. So the guitars are all just my Jazzmaster running straight into an Apollo Twin X. On that, I have a Marshall amp emulation, an 1176 doing somewhere around 3, maybe 5 dB of compression, and then running straight into Ableton. From there, I'm usually running some Galaxy tape to give some kind of slapback and reverb. And then after that, usually just some more reverb and EQ. Sometimes I'll use some tape emulation, but don't think I used any in this instance. So I have that kind of lead element that comes in, and then I have these kind of like chunky chords. And in this one, yeah, okay, so I did use some tape, which is the OCS 45 or 4S from, I believe that's from Oversampled. So yeah, so I have the two elements, which is kind of like this like super washed out lead, then kind of the bass notes just chugging along with some palm mutes, and then I double that up on the chorus here. So hard pan left, right, and then that lead comes in second time around. So that's the bread and butter of the guitar throughout the entire track. Nothing too complicated. I added this one little reverse here coming into that last drop, which I really like. I think that's just from a chord. I don't even know what that is originally from. What's this entire sample? So yeah, I must have just taken one of the guitar takes and reversed it and used that. But I really, really like the sound of that with no processing on it. Love that as a reverse. If I ever make a sample pack one day, I'll be sure to toss that in there. So that's the guitars. Moving on to the synths. So the synths were quite minimal in this one, using the kind of standard Rufus, as I like to call it, patch, with layered on top the same patch going up an octave, running through shimmer black hole at like 80% to give a ton of space. Then that goes into this little Massive X patch. I hate Massive X, if I'm being honest. I won a free copy of it in a online remix competition, and I kind of feel forced to use it every once in a while since I got it for free and I have it. There's a few things I like to do with it, and one of them is this kind of like very cathedral plonk-esque sound. I don't know how to describe it, but to me it sounds like kind of like church bells that are super, super far away. It worked in this instance, but yeah, generally not a huge fan of Massive X. I usually stick to Serum and Diva. Speaking of which, other patches in here is going to the break. Kind of have this deeper Diva patch, which I lifted from my remix of Yukio's and Panama's The Middle. So I made this patch for that track, and then I just reuse that one. Going into some more spacey kind of pad element with that plonk. And then this one just kind of opens up as the track progresses. And then on the drop, just a super simple super saw. So this kind of super awful sounding diva patch when it's on its own, but with the bass, it kind of just fills it out, and you don't really notice that it kind of sounds like shit. And then the last little kind of lead element here is this piano patch I have, which is just Alicia Keys running into essentially a bunch of distortion and reverb that I love the sound of. I've used that on a bunch of productions. And yeah, that's essentially the entirety of the synth. So not a lot of synth work. The synths were just kind of added to fill space. So the entire track was actually produced without any synths. And then once I kind of had the rest of the track made, there was just a little bit of low mids lacking and a little bit of kind of feel lacking. So I went back and added some synths where necessary. But yeah, the majority of the track was definitely the piano, the drums, and the vocal drop, which I will get to. For the bass, just a respace layered with a Prophet from Arturia. On all my Prophets, I really like the Sound Toys Devil Lock at like 2%, like, or 2 out of 10, so about 20%, just to really beef it up. And then scoop out a ton of the mids. Don't really like the sound of those mids, but that gives a great Prophet sound bass in my opinion. So just got the Reese and the Prophet throughout, and then on the drop, it's just a square bass layered with that Reese bass. So super simple. The biggest thing for the bass is just to make sure you have your sub and your kind of low mids balanced. So that was a lot of the effort with this, was carving out a lot of space in the mids of that kind of respace to to leave room for the square bass, which fills up all that space. But other than that, super simple. In terms of the orchestral elements, this time around, it was almost exclusively the Labs or the Spitfire BBC orchestra. So just a lot, again, of small kind of little lines to fill space. My favorite element of it is definitely this kind of pizzicato here, which does come from the Native Instruments string ensemble. But yeah, again, the bass, the cello, the horns, that's all from the BBC Symphony Orchestra, which is free. So if you're looking for a good free orchestral sample library, the Spitfire BBC collab is really awesome. So yeah, just like this little moment to let the track breathe. And I really do love that kind of pizzicato, which I feel gives a lot of motion to the second verse, because the track was definitely feeling a little lacking. So it allowed the track to progress. Another thing that I really enjoy from these kind of orchestral elements is this little riser, if you will, from the bass. So I don't know if anyone notices that, but yeah, as the track's building, right into the pre-drop there's that pause, and this bass kind of brings it in. It's super subtle. Here, I'll play it without it. But yeah, to me, that little moment right there makes a big difference in terms of just the slight amount of texture and grit it gives going into the drop there. So without it, and then with it. Definitely need to be wearing headphones for that, and it's super subtle, but to me, I can't live without it. yeah, definitely one of the kind of small little details that I think makes a big difference. Kick, nothing special about it. Couple little automations on the volume just to cut through in certain sections of the drop that I felt like it needed just a little extra volume. And then we have the big drums. So the big drums I generally like to separate out from the normal drums, where the big drums are anything more orchestral or taiko drums, kind of the big low-endy drums. I always like to separate those out because I feel like mixing them, they need special attention, whereas all of my other drums, which I consider, crash cymbals, hi-hats, toms, snares, I generally can process those together as a drum kit. But taiko drums and all that, I need to pull them out because putting those into the same bus, it doesn't work for me. So the big thing for the taiko drums and the kind of orchestral drums for me is just sample selection and layering. So here I kind of had a rhythm, which is just something pretty simple. So it's just a matter of getting different hits and choosing the hits to kind of sound as if you would be playing them. So trying to select different samples so that you don't have the same hit over and over. And even in instances where you do have repetitions of hits, trying to layer them accordingly so that each one does sound different. And then just kind of tossing them into a room. So here I have a bit of reverb that I'm processing in parallel, just with an Ableton rack to get them to sound tight and together. But yeah, that's all the taiko drums. In the second build, there's a few additional elements. Again, just to have a bigger build as the track progresses, more energy. But again, nothing too complicated there. For the vocals, so the vocals here, I just recorded a bunch of passes of All That I Want, and then again, the Rode NT1 going into my Apollo. Surprisingly didn't do a ton of processing on these. Usually I just process the shit out of my vocals, if I'm being honest. But on this one, kept it decently simple, going into the Apollo with, again, an 1176 and a 2A, doing a few dB of compression each. And then here, running a bit of Soothe for de-essing, a little bit of auto-tune. I had a gate that I guess I left on, but usually I'll usually gate for my demo because I'm not too worried about room. I record with room noise, so I want to get rid of it. But then when I go back and do proper passes, I try to make sure I have a quiet environment to record in, and then hopefully a gate isn't necessary. Additionally, I do go in and clip gain, automate all of the vocal takes. So a gate wouldn't be necessary because I'm doing that here anyways, but I guess there's a gate still in the chain. Then a little bit of Little Altar Boy for some grit. I like the drive on Little Altar Boy in some circumstances, and this one it worked well. And then some more Soothe, Tune, and then a little bit of reverb. I almost never put reverb and delay right on vocals. I always bus it, but there's always an exception, and this time it went right on the track. So the vocals, again, just a little bit of left-right hard panning, and one down the middle, and then just over and over again. Now, at a few different instances in the track, I did try to throw in a little bit of variation. Obviously, it gets repetitive when it's just that over and over and over again for the entire track. So just doing some passes kind of buried in reverb and going up and down octaves, stuff like that. So again, it kind of provides a little bit of motion throughout the track without hopefully being too repetitive. For the drums, as per usual, got a bunch going on here, mostly unnecessary layering. So for the hi-hats, it's mostly this one loop here, which is the 16ths. But obviously wanted to sound realistic, so added a few little moments of accents and some open hi-hats here. So it sounds a little bit more natural than just the straight 16ths going full without stopping. On top of that, there's a few little kind of folly top loop elements on the left and the right, as well as a kind of folly crackle. So again, something that sounds a little bit more realistic and natural rather than just this 16th loop going over and over again. In terms of the kicks, again, a couple ghost note kicks, ghost note snares. An unnecessary amount of claps. And then some toms that are doing the fills here. On the second half, bring in a shaker as well as a ride cymbal and this little conga loop. So yeah, nothing again too complicated. Mostly just that hi-hat work that's carrying through the track. In the second verse, drop it down to a little bit more simple arrangement of the drums, so that again the energy carries through without losing the fact that you have dynamics from the chorus into the second verse. And then going into the kind of second pre-chorus here, just a ride cymbal with a little bit of a clap build. Again, nothing too complicated. Finally, we have the vocal chop. So the vocal chop does have a ton of processing on it. So the vocal chop actually comes from an initial vocal take I did in the demo, and then chopping that up into this kind of rhythm here, and then running it through a ton of processing. I did melodyne it before chopping it, and then I melodyned it after I chopped it with that specific melody. And then I ran that through Little Alter Boy, and I'm actually using the pitch function of Little Alter Boy, and as you can see, I'm automating the pitch. So not only am I getting tune from Melodyne, but I'm actually getting tune from Little Alter Boy, plus the drive on Little Alter Boy, which I really do like. Running it through Soothe because I was getting a ton of really harsh resonant frequencies. Running that through Autotune. I was getting a ton of mouth click, so getting rid of the mouth click with some RX. Then there is, in the Valhalla Supermassive, there is a setting on the reverb, which I'm not going to mention because it's kind of my secret sauce for this. But essentially, it's almost like a chorus type reverb that I really like, that gives it the space. And then that's going into some vintage verb, and then a little bit of OTT. And I probably mentioned this in breakdowns before, but I'm not a huge fan of OTT. Maybe I just don't know how to use it properly, but yeah, I rarely use OTT in any otherwise fine production, other than some rare instances like now where I probably slapped it on because I needed it in the instance of working up the demo and then liked how it sounded and didn't go back and change it. So that was the vocal chop here, which I then bounced out and did a little bit of further processing here. A ton of Soothe, as you'll notice, mostly because I was using it to attack certain areas that were really problematic, and I didn't want to do it all at once, because I find that if you go too hard with Soothe, it starts to sound weird. So I did my best to try to do it almost like a gain staging thing where you're doing a little bit here, a little bit there, and with an end result that hopefully sounds pretty good, versus had I aggressively gone in with one instance of Soothe. So that's the final chop there, which I then tried to double with a little bit of guitar, which made the final production, but is so buried in the mix you can't hear it. So then with the everything in, including the chop, and that's pretty much production. Couple little sweeps and crashes and falls, but nothing complicated there. The only other thing I'll add is, so again, in all of my productions, when I'm kind of approaching the mixing and mastering phase, I do like to add in previous mix downs and previous masters. Here I have the pre-masters to make sure I'm going in the right directions. But yeah, it's nice to kind of have references to what you would already done to make sure you're moving in the right direction. And one that I find interesting is the original kind of demo of this. So if you're following Otherwise Fine on Instagram, which you should be, then you would have seen the reel of this that I posted maybe a few months ago. And that is what I use as the original reference for all of this. So this is kind of what was posted on Instagram. So yeah, this is what I whipped up in a few hours, kind of that first demo. And then here is the near finished production. So from demo to Spotify. But yeah, I believe that is the entire production. Of course, if I missed anything or if you have any specific questions, feel free to shoot me a DM on Otherwise Fine's Instagram or comment on the video. Once again, thank you so much for all the streams, for all the support on this record, and we'll catch you in the next breakdown.